The Roly-Poly in the Moonlight. Chapter 1. The Beginning of the Moonlit Adventure. On a quiet night, a roly-poly named Dan lived with his family at the edge of the forest. The moon was shining brightly, and Dan, driven by a sense of adventure, decided to leave home. What secrets does the night forest hold? He wondered as he ventured into the forest on his tiny feet. The forest at night was entirely different from during the day. Nocturnal creatures were active, and an owl hooted in the distance while crickets chirped in the grass. Though Dan was a bit nervous, he felt excited about this new world. The moonlight streamed through the trees, lighting Dan's path. Suddenly, he noticed something glittering ahead. What could that be? He thought and moved towards the light. There, he found a small pond with the moonlight reflecting beautifully on its surface. Dan was mesmerized by the scene and stood still for a while, just watching. Suddenly, a gentle voice called from behind him. "What are you doing out so late?" Turning around, Dan saw a small firefly, glowing softly and smiling at him. "I'm Dan. I'm exploring the forest at night," Dan replied. The firefly, intrigued, said, "In that case, let me guide you." Overjoyed, Dan decided to follow the firefly. Thus, Dan's moonlit adventure began. Guided by the firefly's light, Dan ventured deeper into the forest, his heart full of anticipation for what this adventure would bring. Chapter 2. The Curious Forest Friends. Following the firefly's lead, Dan met various nocturnal residents of the forest. The first was a worm named Mimzook. Mimzook popped its head out of the ground and asked, "What brings you here, little visitor?" "I'm Dan. I'm exploring the forest at night," Dan explained. Mimzook responded, "That sounds exciting. Be careful out there." Next, they encountered Caroline the frog, singing by the pond. "Good evening, Caroline," greeted the firefly. Caroline replied, "Well, hello, firefly. And who's this new friend?" Dan introduced himself, "I'm Dan. I'm exploring the forest at night." Caroline asked, "May I join you on your adventure?" Thus, Dan, the firefly, and Caroline formed a trio and continued their journey deeper into the forest. They then met Batty the bat, hanging from a high branch. Batty asked, "Hello, night explorers. Where are you heading?" "We're exploring the depths of the forest," Dan replied. Batty offered, "Let me guide you. I know many of the forest's secrets." With Batty joining them, the four ventured further. Dan was amazed and delighted by the strange creatures of the night forest. Spending time with new friends was incredibly enjoyable. As they moved towards their next destination, Dan's heart raced with excitement for the adventures ahead. Chapter 3. The Glittering Secret Spring. As they ventured deeper, the firefly announced, "We're almost at a special place." With eager hearts, Dan and his friends followed. They finally arrived at a glittering secret spring. "This is the secret spring," said the firefly. Dan gasped at its beauty. The spring's water was clear, reflecting the moonlight and sparkling like a starry sky. Tiny light particles danced on the surface. This spring has special powers. Drinking its water will heal your heart and make you feel better, explained the firefly. Curious, Dan took a sip. Warmth spread through his body, and he felt a deep sense of calm. It's truly a magical spring, Dan thought, amazed. Caroline and Batty also drank from the spring and felt rejuvenated. Flowers bloomed around the spring, and Dan picked one to bring home to his mother. She'll love this, he thought, holding the flower carefully. As the night deepened, the spring's glow intensified. I'll never forget this beauty, Dan thought. The time spent with his friends was filled with joy and contentment. It's time to head back, the firefly said. Though a bit saddened, Dan cherished the memories of this wonderful night. Leaving the spring behind, they began their journey back to the forest's entrance. Chapter 4: Overcoming Challenges with Courage. On their way back, Dan and his friends faced an unexpected challenge. Dark clouds covered the sky, and a fierce thunderstorm began. We need to find shelter quickly, shouted the firefly. Follow me. Batty took the lead. From high above, Batty spotted a safe place. Over there, hurry, he pointed. They all ran towards the spot Batty indicated. The rain poured harder, and thunder rumbled. Dan felt scared and almost froze, but the presence of his friends gave him courage. Determined to overcome the challenge together, they pressed on. After running for a while, Batty led them to a large tree hollow. They took shelter there, and Dan thought, if I were alone, I'd be too scared to move. It was the support of his friends that got him this far. Is everyone okay? Asked Caroline. Dan replied, yes, I wasn't scared because you were all with me. The firefly smiled, I'm so glad we're all safe. As the rain gradually stopped and the moon reappeared, the firefly said, let's go. We're almost home. With that, they resumed their journey toward the forest's exit. Through this experience, Dan learned the importance of friends and the courage to overcome difficulties. He realized that with friends, any challenge could be conquered. Grateful, Dan thought, thank you, everyone. Chapter 5: Reunion Under the Moonlight. As they neared the forest's edge, Dan saw the lights of his home. We're almost there, he thought, feeling a mix of sadness and joy. Though the adventure was ending, he was happy to reunite with his family. Dan, this is where we part ways, said the firefly. Dan expressed his gratitude. Thank you, firefly. Thanks to you, I had a wonderful adventure. Caroline and Batty also said, come visit us anytime. Of course, I will, Dan promised. Though sad to part, he looked forward to meeting his friends again. Waving goodbye, Dan walked home. At home, his mother anxiously awaited. Dan, are you okay? Where were you? She asked. Dan recounted his night adventure. I explored the forest with friends and found a wonderful place. His mother gently scolded, that's great, but don't go out alone at night anymore. Dan agreed, I understand. But I want to go on another adventure with my friends. His mother suggested, then go during the day next time. Make sure to tell your friends. Dan nodded. I will. He handed his mother the flower he picked, saying, "This is for you." She was delighted. That night, Dan lay in bed, still excited from the adventure, and drifted into sleep with memories of the night. Moonlight streamed through the window, softly illuminating his face. In his heart, Dan wished for more wonderful adventures and fell asleep with a happy feeling. Thus, Dan's moonlit adventure came to an end, but it hinted at the beginning of new adventures.